Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah,
Today,
always good to be back.
we're taking a look at,
Absolutely.
this is a single excerpt from Ted Koppel's book, Lights Out.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
This is a good one.
scary stuff.
Definitely.
What happens if the U.S. power grid goes down?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean just like a couple hours, right?
I don't know. I'm talking.
For days, weeks, even longer.
Yeah, Koppel isn't just theorizing. He goes deep.
Yeah, he talks to
Talking to the people.
the people who would be...
Who would be on the front lines of this disaster.
If this happened.
Yeah, we're talking
like
about
top brass at FEMA.
top brass.
State-level officials. Even folks from the NYPD.
NYPD even.
It's their candid insights
Oh, yeah.
that make this excerpt so fascinating.
That's what we're here for.
And that's exactly what we're here to unpack for you today.
Absolutely.
We'll pull out the most
shocking,
revelations.
the unexpected details that might make you want to go out.
Want to stock up on batteries and canned goods.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
That's right.
Well, maybe half kidding.
That's right.
Ready to dive in.
Let's do it.
One of the first things
Yeah.
that jumped out at me
Okay.
was how government and power industry folks
Yeah.
often compare cyber attacks on the grid
Yeah.
to natural disasters.
Sure.
They talk about the grid's resilience.
Of course.
You know,
Don't you?
how it bounces back after hurricanes and ice storms.
Right.
But Koppel argues that this comparison is
Yeah.
misleading.
Misleading and, frankly, dangerous.
And frankly dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
He makes a really interesting point about this.
Okay.
Natural disasters, while devastating,
Right.
are essentially random.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
A cyber attack, on the other hand,
Okay.
can be highly targeted.
Targeted.
Yeah. Think about it.
Yeah.
Someone who wants to cripple the grid
Uh-huh.
wouldn't just randomly attack.
Right.
They'd go after the system's weak points,
Oh.
the critical nodes that would cause the most
The most damage.
widespread disruption,
So it's less like a hurricane
less like a hurricane.
and more like a surgeon with a scalpel
Yeah,
going in with precision.
precision to cause the
So
maximum.
we cause maximum damage.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a cyber attack
Right.
so much harder to plan for
Yeah.
and recover from.
Uh-huh.
It's not just about rebuilding damaged infrastructure. It's about outsmarting an invisible enemy
Oh, wow.
who knows exactly how to exploit the system.
All right.
Koppel used the example of Stuxnet,
Stuxnet.
the malware that targeted Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah.
It's a chilling reminder that cyber attacks can be
Yeah.
incredibly sophisticated.
Remind me about Stuxnet.
Oh, yeah.
I vaguely remember it in the news.
Okay, so this was back in 2010,
Okay.
and Stuxnet was unlike anything
Really?
anyone had seen before.
Wow.
It wasn't just about crashing computers. It was designed to sabotage physical equipment.
Oh, wow.
And the scariest part,
What?
it did it by making the engineers in charge
Okay.
think everything was running smoothly.
So they were literally watching the system destroy itself,
That's right.
and they had no idea what was happening.
That's the insidious genius of it.
Oh, my God.
At the time they realized something was wrong,
Yeah.
the damage was already done.
Wow.
And that's the kind of threat
Right.
Koppel is worried about.
When it comes to the power grid.
When it comes to our power grid, that's right.
Okay, so cyber attacks are a whole different
Whole different ball game.
than your typical natural disaster.
Yes.
That makes sense. But the real question is, if something like this happened,
Right.
how prepared are we to handle it?
Well, Koppel spoke to people at FEMA.
Okay.
And let's just say the picture isn't exactly reassuring.
Oh, no.
It seems that their plans are largely focused on natural disasters.
Okay.
For example, their plan for a major earthquake in California
Uh-huh.
involves a mass evacuation of millions of people eastward.
Evacuating millions.
Millions.
That sounds logistically impossible.
It is.
Where would they even go?
Koppel thinks so too.
Right.
And he highlights a key difference here.
Okay.
An earthquake causes physical damage.
Right.
A cyber attack doesn't.
Oh. So mass evacuation
Might not be the answer,
might not be the answer.
especially if the outage is widespread
Right.
and lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
You'd essentially be displacing millions of people,
Yeah.
potentially for weeks or months,
Right.
with no clear destination
Right.
or plan for their long-term care.
And it's not like everyone has the means to just pick up and leave.
Right.
What about people who are elderly disabled
That's right.
or just don't have the resources to relocate on a moment's notice?
Exactly. And that's where the cracks in FEMA's planning
Right.
start to show.
Yeah.
Koppel gives this amazing example of a conversation between a FEMA associate administrator and his boss, The actual FEMA administrator,
Okay.
the associate administrator, confidently claims they could evacuate millions from Manhattan.
Okay.
But his boss,
Yeah.
he completely shoots the idea down,
Oh, wow.
calling it impractical,
So even within FEMA,
even within FEMA.
there's no clear consensus on how to handle a situation like this.
Not exactly confidence-inspiring, is it?
Not exactly confidence-inspiring.
Oh.
And this raises the question,
Yeah.
if the feds aren't on the same page,
Right.
what about individual states?
Individual states, that's right.
How are they preparing for this kind of scenario?
That's a great question.
Koppel decided to find out,
Uh-huh.
focusing on New York State.
Okay, why New York?
Why New York?
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
New York City is one of those densely populated areas in the country,
Right.
heavily reliant on the power grid.
If a major outage hit,
Oh, yeah.
it would be ground zero for the chaos
Absolutely.
that would likely follow.
That's right.
And Koppel managed to speak with
He did.
the New York State Commissioner of Homeland Security
Right.
to get their perspective.
Their perspective.
And what did they have to say?
What did they say?
Do they have a plan to get 8 million people out of the city
8 million people?
if the lights go out?
Quite the opposite.
Really?
The commissioner was very clear.
Okay.
Evacuating New York City is not an option.
Not an option.
Their strategy focuses on setting up shelters within the city.
Shelters for 8 million people.
8 million people.
That seems ambitious, to say the least.
It does.
Trying to provide food, water,
Trying to provide
and sanitation for that many people
that many people.
in a city that's suddenly gone dark
Yeah.
would be a logistical nightmare.
That's exactly the point
Right.
Koppel is trying to make.
Yeah.
He highlights all these
Seemingly minor details.
seemingly minor details.
And most people wouldn't even consider.
Wouldn't even think about.
Like, what happens to all the people trapped in elevators?
Oh. When the power goes out.
In elevators.
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about that.
Right.
Suddenly you've got
Hundreds,
maybe even thousands
maybe even thousands.
of elevator rescues happening all at once.
Well, at once.
It would completely overwhelm emergency services.
Completely overwhelmed.
Even if they could operate without power.
Even if they could.
And that's just one example.
And that's just one.
Think about the traffic jams.
Oh, yeah.
As people try to get home.
Try and get home.
The lack of refrigeration for food.
Refrigeration.
The potential for looting and unrest.
It's starting to sound like a scene.
It's starting to sound like a scene from a disaster movie.
From a disaster movie.
And that brings us to the next.
The next big question.
Big question Koppel tackles.
What is that?
The issue of food.
Food. Oh, yeah.
The government does have stockpiles of those MREs.
Right.
The meals ready to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be realistic.
Let's be realistic.
Those are only going to last for so long.
Especially in a city like New York.
Especially in a city.
So what happens when those run out?
That's right.
Where does the food come from?
Well, Koppel got in touch with
Okay.
a Saratoga Trading Company,
Okay.
one of the major suppliers of emergency food in the U.S.
Okay.
And their answer is pretty startling.
Let me guess.
What is it?
They don't have enough to feed a city
Nope.
the size of New York for very long.
You're catching on.
In fact, they were pretty blunt.
Pretty blunt.
A major widespread crisis
Yeah.
would wipe out their entire stock within days.
Within days.
Not weeks, not months.
That's right.
Days.
These days.
And then what?
And then what?
Well, I guess we'd start ordering more, right?
Sure.
Assuming the supply chains are even functioning.
Assuming
But even then, there's a problem.
there's a problem.
They pointed to the 2011 tsunami in Japan
Oh, yeah.
as a chilling example.
Chilling example.
Remember the global panic buying that followed?
Yeah, do remember. Vaguely.
I remember the news showing empty store shelves,
Right.
but I didn't connect it to, well, anything beyond
Right.
people overreacting.
It was more than that.
Really?
That surge in demand
Yeah.
meant even U.S. customers
Okay.
were waiting 3 months
Wow.
for their orders of emergency food to be filled.
3 months.
3 months.
That's not reassuring.
Not reassuring.
So even if we have the money to buy more food,
Yeah,
the supply chain might not be able to deliver it in time.
that's right.
And we're not even talking about the potential for price gouging
Well, yeah.
or hoarding.
Hoarding.
That would inevitably happen
Inevitably.
in a crisis.
In a crisis.
It all paints a very bleak picture.
Very bleak.
And that's before we even start talking about the human factor,
Oh,
the potential for social breakdown.
the potential.
And that, I think, is the part
That's right.
that really scares people.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that after a quick break.
Okay.
Stay with us.
We'll be right back.
We're back. And before the break, we were wading into
Some pretty dark territory.
some pretty dark territory.
Yeah.
But Koppel doesn't just leave us with
Yeah.
a sense of impending doom.
Right.
He actually explores some potential solutions,
Mhm.
ways we could be better prepared
Better prepared. That's right.
for a lights out scenario. And some of them are pretty surprising.
Yeah. One interview that really stood out to me was Koppel's conversation with Craig Fugate,
Oh,
the
yeah.
FEMA administrator at the time.
I remember that. He seemed like a straight shooter.
Yeah.
Someone who wasn't afraid to admit
Mhm.
the limitations of the system.
He was surprisingly frank about what FEMA could and couldn't do
Yeah.
in a prolonged crisis.
It's not exactly the "we've got this" message
No.
we're used to hearing from government officials.
Exactly. And I think that's why Koppel included it.
Yeah.
Fugate's honesty highlights the need for
Okay.
a different approach,
A different approach.
one that doesn't rely solely on government assistance,
Right.
but focuses on building resilience at the individual and community levels.
So what does that look like?
What did that look like?
How do we shift from a mindset of dependency
Yeah.
to one of self-sufficiency?
Well, Koppel explores several ideas,
Okay.
but one that caught my attention
Uh-huh.
was the concept of microgrids.
Microgrids.
Have you heard much about those?
I've heard the term thrown around,
Okay.
but to be honest, I'm not entirely sure
Okay.
what it means in practical terms.
Essentially, a microgrid is like
Yeah.
a mini power grid
Okay.
that can operate independently of the main grid.
Independently.
They can be powered by various sources,
Okay.
solar panels, wind turbines, generators, you name it.
So it's like having your own little power plant,
That's right.
right in your neighborhood or even your own home.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this could be a game changer in a blackout.
Really?
Hospitals, for example, could have their own microgrids to keep essential systems running.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the impact that would have
Yeah.
on a community's ability to cope
Right.
during
Yeah.
a prolonged outage.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what about ordinary people?
Ordinary people.
Those of us who don't run hospitals,
Uh-huh.
could individual homes have microgrids?
Absolutely.
Really?
Couple talks about homeowners investing in things like
Okay.
solar panels and battery storage systems.
So this would essentially allow them to create
Yes.
their own personal microgrids,
That's right.
keeping the lights on,
Keeping the lights on.
even when the main grid is down.
That's the idea.
It sounds amazing in theory,
It does.
but I imagine it's pretty expensive
There is an upfront cost, for sure,
to set up something like that.
but the technology is getting better and cheaper
Okay,
all the time.
that's good.
Plus, there are often government incentives
Uh-huh.
and tax breaks for people who invest in renewable energy.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
But even if the cost becomes more manageable,
Okay.
I think there's a bigger hurdle:
What's that?
awareness.
Awareness.
Most people just don't see a long-term power outage
Right.
as a real threat.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
We've been conditioned to think that the lights will always come back on,
Yeah.
that the government will always be there
To bail us out.
to bail us out. And that's the dangerous mindset
Right.
Koppel is trying to challenge.
So how do we change that mindset?
How do we change that mindset?
How do we get people to take this threat seriously
It's a tough question.
without sounding like a bunch of doomsday preppers?
Koppel suggests we need a cultural shift.
Okay.
Instead of reacting to disasters,
Yeah.
we need to become more proactive.
It's like we're always playing catch up, right?
Exactly.
We only start paying attention
Yeah.
after something bad has already happened.
Right, and then we scramble to fix what's broken.
Yeah. Throwing billions of dollars at the problem.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Koppel argues that it's far more effective
Right.
and ultimately less costly
Yeah.
to invest in preparedness measures
Okay.
before a crisis hits.
Before it happens.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Strengthening the grid,
Uh-huh.
promoting microgrids,
Right.
educating people about self-sufficiency.
It makes sense.
These are all things we can do now
Yeah.
to mitigate the potential chaos of a blackout.
But I can't help but think that it's a tough sell.
It is a tough sell.
Yeah.
It's hard to get people excited about something
Right.
that might never happen.
It's human nature to focus on immediate concerns,
Yes,
not hypothetical future disasters.
it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But Koppel makes a compelling case
Okay.
that the stakes are simply too high to ignore.
Right.
Think about the potential consequences.
Yeah. The economic disruption,
The economic disruption,
food shortages,
food shortages, social unrest,
social unrest, even loss of life.
even loss of life.
He's not sugarcoating it, that's for sure.
No, he's not.
And he's not offering any easy answers either.
No, he's not. But that's what makes his book so thought-provoking.
Right. It's a wake-up call.
It is.
forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths
Uncomfortable truths. That's right.
about our vulnerability and our collective lack of preparedness.
Our lack of preparedness.
One thing that really resonated with me
Okay.
was his point about the different levels of preparedness.
Different levels.
It's not just about having a stockpile of food and water.
right.
It's also about mental and emotional preparedness.
Absolutely. Koppel talks about building resilience,
Okay.
both as individuals and as communities.
So having a support network,
Support network,
knowing your neighbors,
knowing your neighbors,
having a plan
these are all crucial factors
in weathering a crisis.
in weathering a crisis.
And that goes beyond just physical survival, right?
It does.
It's also about maintaining social cohesion,
right.
preventing things from spiraling into chaos and violence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He brings up Hurricane Katrina as a prime example.
Oh, yeah.
In many ways, the breakdown of law and order
Right.
was more devastating than the storm itself.
It's a sobering reminder that a crisis can bring out,
The best and worst in people.
the best and the worst.
And that the strength of our social fabric
That's right.
is just as important as the strength
It's just important.
of our physical
Your
infrastructure.
physical infrastructure, in a way, it's all connected.
I think that's one of the most important takeaways
Oh, yeah.
from Koppel's book.
Yeah.
We can't just focus on the technical aspects
Right.
of grid security and emergency response.
We can't.
We need to address the human element,
The human element.
the social and psychological factors
Yeah.
that come into play during a crisis.
It's about fostering a culture of preparedness,
Oh,
where everyone understands the risks
right.
and takes steps to mitigate them both individually and collectively.
And it's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
We are.
A crisis like a major power outage would affect everyone,
Yeah, everyone.
regardless of income, background.
Or political beliefs.
We'd all be in the same boat, paddling furiously to stay afloat.
That's a powerful image.
Jesus.
And it underscores Koppel's message that preparedness
Yes.
is not about fear-mongering
Yeah.
or prepping for some apocalyptic doomsday scenario.
Not about that.
It's about being realistic,
Realistic.
responsible,
Responsible.
and empowered.
Empowered.
It's about taking steps to protect ourselves,
Protect ourselves.
our families, and our community.
Our families and communities.
It's about building a more resilient future together.
Together, that's right.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive
Into Lights Out.
into Ted Koppel's Lights Out.
Yeah.
We've talked about
Vulnerabilities.
the vulnerabilities of our power grid,
Yep.
the potential for widespread disruption,
Yeah.
and the, frankly, pretty terrifying consequences
that's
of
right.
a long-term blackout.
Yeah.
But Koppel doesn't leave us completely in the dark.
No, he doesn't.
He does highlight some glimmers of hope,
Glimmers of hope.
things that are happening right now that show a growing awareness of this issue and a move toward more proactive.
More proactive preparedness.
That's right.
One of the most encouraging trends Koppel points out
Okay.
is that a lot of the most innovative and effective solutions are happening at the local level.
At the local level.
He talks about communities that aren't waiting
Oh,
for the federal government to tell them what to do.
They're taking matters into their own hands.
Can you give us an example?
Sure.
What does that kind of grassroots preparedness
Yeah.
actually look like?
Koppel features a town in Vermont
Okay.
that's created what they call a
Yeah.
community resilience center.
A community resilience center.
It's incredible, really.
What do they have?
They've got backup generators,
Okay.
stockpiles of food and water,
Wow.
even a medical clinic.
A medical clinic.
It's designed to be
Oh.
a central hub for the entire community
So they're ready.
in case of a major emergency.
Wow. That's impressive.
It is
It sounds like something
like something
out of a post-apocalyptic movie.
out of a movie, but in a good way.
But in a good way, right?
Yeah.
And the best part is, it's not just about stockpiling supplies.
Okay.
They've also focused on building community connections.
Oh, that's great.
Fostering a sense of self-reliance. and
Right.
training people in basic emergency response skills.
So they're really thinking this through.
They're empowering residents
Yeah.
to take care of themselves and each other.
So it's not just a physical space.
It's not.
It's a change in mindset,
It is.
a recognition that they're all in this together
All in this together.
and that they need to be prepared to rely on each other.
Exactly. And Koppel argues that this is where real change can happen.
Okay.
Not from top-down government mandates,
Right.
but from the ground up.
From the ground up.
It's about communities coming together,
Yeah.
identifying their own
Unique needs.
Unique needs and vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And taking ownership of their own preparedness.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But this brings up something I've been wondering about.
Okay, what's that?
We talked about all the potential triggers
Triggers.
for a blackout.
Right.
Cyber attacks, natural disasters.
EMPs.
EMPs.
Yeah.
From your perspective,
Yeah.
what do you think is the most likely scenario?
Oh, that's a tough one.
What's the thing that keeps you up at night?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
All of the threats
Right.
Koppel outlines are real and credible.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick the most likely scenario, I'd say it's probably not a single event,
Okay.
but a convergence of
A
factors.
perfect storm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine a situation
Okay.
where we have a major natural disaster, let's say a hurricane,
Okay.
that knocks out power in a large region.
Right.
The grid is already strained, resources are stretched thin.
Okay.
Then, while we're in that vulnerable state,
Yeah.
a cyberattack hits,
Oh, no.
targeting key infrastructure.
Oh, wow.
The combination could easily lead to a cascading failure, a domino effect
So multiple things happening.
that takes down the entire grid.
It sounds like preparing for a blackout
Yeah.
isn't just about having
A flashlight.
a flashlight and some extra batteries.
And some extra batteries.
It's about building resilience against a whole range
A whole
of
range.
potential disruption.
That's a great way to put it.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have
and it's been a lot to take in.
a lot to take in.
I'm curious, now that we've reached the end of our deep dive into Lights Out,
Lights out.
what's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway
What's the one thing you hope our listeners will walk away thinking about?
for me, it's this.
Okay.
We're at a crossroads.
A crossroads?
We can choose to ignore the warnings
Uh-huh.
and continue down the path of complacency,
Right.
hoping that the worst case scenario never happens.
Right. Hoping it never happens.
Or we can choose to be proactive
Okay.
to start building a more resilient future
Uh-huh.
for ourselves and our communities.
Forever.
Koppel's book is a powerful call to action,
It is.
and I believe it's up to each of us to answer that call.
Well said. This deep dive has certainly been an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, me too.
I've already started thinking about what steps I can take
Yeah,
to be more prepared, and I hope it's done the same
I hope so too.
for our listeners.
And remember,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
The more we understand about the risks we face,
Yeah.
the better equipped we'll be
To mitigate them.
to mitigate them and create a brighter, more secure future
For everyone.
for everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Lights Out.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time
See you next time.
for another fascinating journey into the world of ideas.
Absolutely.
Stay curious, stay informed,
Stay informed.
and most importantly, stay prepared.
Stay prepared.